If you feel yourself constantly reaching for external validation, or you choose your actions based on how other people will perceive you, or maybe your emotions are completely dictated by other people's opinion of you, or maybe you are constantly trying to manage how things play out in your life and how other people think and feel. If this is you, this episode is especially for you. Being yourself is a concept that is really shoved down our throats most of our lives, and I feel like a lot of us don't really know what that means or how to attain it. Worse yet, we think we are being ourselves because we've absorbed so much input from the external world that we've convinced ourselves that this is who we really are. It is only when you take the time to intentionally get to know who you are that you begin to quiet the external chatter, begin to hear your intuition, and actually start to live your life more in alignment with who you really are because you know what you truly think and feel. And when you don't take the time to get to know who you actually are, you start to live your life on default mode compared to living by what you actually want. You follow other people's timelines and expectations and definitions of success because you don't know what that truly, genuinely means to you. Something that's absolutely wild to me is that we mistake our survival mechanisms as our personality, like that we people please, or that we're overthinkers, or that we have to shrink ourselves in order to fit in alignment with certain people in our lives, or being somebody that overfunctions or caretakes, or so many different things that are actually just us trying to protect ourselves. But we've convinced ourselves that that's who we are because we've operated that way for so long. You stay stuck in these storylines that aren't even true anymore. These old identities, these old labels you've given yourself, these old wounds you're identifying with. You easily get pulled into other people's negativity, their energy, their bad experiences. You allow yourself to get so integrated into that. And when you get sucked into that, it starts to feel like your life is chronically off. Like you're not living in the way you thought you were going to, or not living in the way you genuinely want to. And a lot of the time, it's because you're living with the external so at the forefront of your mind compared to like internally how you want to move through your life. And when you do that, you feel like life is happening to you, not through you. That the things that go on in your life are things that you are just having to react and respond to, that you don't actually get to choose and experience the things that are happening within your life. And that's when we start to struggle with our confidence because you don't know your values or your morals or what's genuinely important to you or what genuinely fills you up. You're just living on a whim. And then we go to externals to validate that what we are doing in our life is good because we can't get ourselves to genuinely feel full inside because we don't know what genuinely makes us feel full inside because we haven't taken the time to get to know who we actually are. So we rely on the external validation as fuel to get us through our life. And then we just follow the same patterns again and again and again because without self-awareness, you can't rewrite the story. You have to know what you don't want anymore because if you don't, then you're just going to follow what feels comfortable and you're going to mistake the comfortability for doing what is right, for your intuition. And when you partake in all of this stuff, you miss out on the magnetic aligned version that you were actually meant to grow into. Your dream self is not a fantasy version that's never going to happen. It's somebody that comes from intentional identity work. And that's why this episode is all about becoming the person that you actually are. You just haven't done the identity work yet. So let's talk about how to make that happen. Because if you learn who you actually are, you'll gain that internal compass so that you stop outsourcing, overthinking, guessing for all of your choices. You'll stop feeling like you're chasing confidence because it will just be naturally a part of who you are from knowing your values and your your energy and how you truly think and feel about things. You'll feel actually aligned with the things that are in your life because you're choosing intentionally the things that you want and the things that are meant for you. Your life will actually start to feel aligned because you're choosing things that match your actual identity and not the identity that you have adopted in order to get by in the world. You'll effortlessly be able to set boundaries. You'll stop absorbing everybody's energy. Your decision making will get easier. Relationships will get better because you're going to be living as yourself. So the only people that are going to be in your life are the people that are in alignment with you, and you will repel the people that are not. You'll break all of your old patterns for good because you'll know and understand why you do what you do. And when you know and understand why you do what you do, you'll have the power to do things differently, making you magnetic because you're not doing things that are going to make you impressive from this performative place. You just genuinely will be operating and moving through your life as authentically as possible and as connected to who you actually are as possible. And instead of living by your conditioning and your trauma responses and as a version of yourself that keeps you aligned with certain people in your life, you'll actually get to be like one whole rounded, magnetic, incredible, powerful, authentic version of yourself. You won't have to be certain people when you're around certain people. You won't have to act certain ways. You won't have to feel exhausted all the time because your life just doesn't feel like you. You will feel so naturally and powerfully yourself. And it is not going to be some high pressure, life changing mess that you have to dissect, solve, and figure out. It will all just naturally fall into your lap when you follow the things that we're going to be talking about today. Please make sure to rate and review the show. It really does help get Wellish out to more like-minded people like you and I. And of course, make sure to subscribe to the show as well so that you do not miss an episode. I want to talk about the first step that is so often overlooked. And I think it's so important to recognize this as a step because it allows us to start to move in the direction we want to move instead of allowing ourselves to be crushed by the feelings that we're experiencing when we're in step one. Step one is that shitty, gross feeling that you're feeling right now. Step one is recognizing that this life that you're living isn't working. You have to become aware of what isn't working in order to start to grow and change into the version of you that you want to actually be. But when we think that all of these feelings that we don't like are part of our problem, we allow ourselves to be crushed by the weight of them, when in reality, it's step number one. It's a necessary part in this process. Whether it's something major that happened that made you realize like, oh my God, I can't live like this anymore, or it's just a bunch of little stuff that constantly is piling up against you and making you feel really unhappy and unsatisfied with your life, you're experiencing the universal feeling of outgrowing your old identity. There's an identity lag happening. Your mindset and your perception and how you feel does not reflect your outer reality. And so that creates anxiety and misalignment and feelings of inadequacy and failure and self-doubt. Please allow me to beat it into your head because this is what people get wrong when they try to become this new identity is they think that they have to do all of this extra stuff. They have to pile in all of these new routines and new habits. And I'm going to follow what this Instagram influencer says. You're trying to pack on all of the aesthetic stuff, but all you're doing is band-aiding the issue. Genuine identity shifting, genuine identity growth is a revealing. It's taking off all of the external stuff that we've been fed, not packing on more externals, and revealing who it is we truly are and what we really want. You have to get brutally honest with yourself about who you really are. And it's possible that not every single thing that's revealed to you is going to be something that you like about yourself. But without taking accountability for who you really are, you're never going to give yourself the opportunity to change. You're going to continue to pack externals on that hide the truth of who you really are. Instead of being the only one, you don't have to tell anybody, like the only one that actually has to look at it and be like, look, here's the thing. thing. This is actually what I want. This obviously is who I am. This is the pattern I continue to repeat. Why is that? What is it inside of me that needs that compared to like what I wish I wanted? One of the easiest ways to be brutally honest with yourself about who you really are is by identifying who you're really not. So that's absolutely correct. I'm giving you permission to lean into the self deprecation, giving you permission to lean into the ish part of your well ishness and actually identify what it is you don't like, what you don't want, what's not you. Because in order to find your real self, to become who you actually are, you have to strip away all of the false identities. So, how do we identify the false reality when really we genuinely believe that these identities are our identities and they're not false because we've been living with them for so long? We truly never even considered that it's possible that they could be a false identity. One of those things are the roles that we inherited, not the roles that we chose. So, thinking of like the good girl, the achiever, the perfectionist, the caretaker, the fixer. They're also the identities that we confuse for being our personality, like being a people pleaser or an overthinker or shrinking or being hyper independent. Or it's the stories that no longer fit your identity, like you're too emotional, or you're not confident, or you're not creative. Do you know how many people I've heard say, oh, I'm not an artist. Oh, I'm not someone who works out. Oh, I'm not a healthy eater. Because you just identify with that story and you live that way when you don't have to. You can definitely sit down and journal about this or take the time to like think about what all of these things are that could potentially be false identities. But honestly, for me, that just causes more overwhelm. And it's that thing that happens when you're reading about the self-improvement exercise, you see it on the internet and you're like, oh my God, like that sounds so cool. I want to try it. So you get your piece of paper and you like do the whole exercise, or you read it in a book and you're like, okay, I'm going to do the whole exercise, and it never sticks. It's like, okay, cool. Like I learned that and maybe it was fun in the moment, but you can't actually carry those things with you through the rest of your life. But the thing that actually lets you carry the learning through the rest of your life of what those false identities are noticing them on a day-to-day basis. And you're not going to notice every single one 100% of the time, but being aware of it and keeping an eye out for it and noticing when those false identities present themselves, that is how you start to build the habit. But that means that it's a practice that takes time, like this is not going to be something that you're going to watch this video and you're going to sit down and do an exercise and now you're going to be healed and you're going to cross this threshold and you're always going to identify as who you actually are, not who you've absorbed from the external world of being. It's going to take time because it's a multi-step process that you have to integrate into your life in order for it to naturally be who you are. Because again, we're not piling on new identity. We're not piling on new behaviors and actions. We're revealing who you genuinely are inside. And you do that by living your life and noticing where you're not being genuine first. Once you do that, you'll begin to recognize the things that cause you to start to engage in the behavior of your false identity and start to move in a different direction. And the more you get to know who you actually are, you won't by default need to engage in the behavior of the old identity. You'll be able to engage in the behavior of who you actually are, and you'll start to behave that way less and less and less. It's possible that you will always once in a while engage in the false identity because you're trying to protect yourself and some situation could play out that makes you revert to that old behavior. But for the most part, when you practice this, it's what you do most of the time that matters. And when most of the time you don't act as this false identity, you act in alignment with who you actually are, you'll feel the effects of that. So we have to dig out who we actually are. We have to unearth who that person is out from all of the gunk that we've absorbed from the externals. And we have to do that without being a perfectionist about it. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time. Definitely not right away, but also there's always going to be things that come up, things that wound you further, that push you back, that cause you to have to behave in a certain way way. Maybe you lean into those survival mechanisms at times in your life more than others, but it's the consistent practice of this and what you do a majority of the time that matters, not that you do it perfectly 100% of the time. You also have to do it without being performative about it, which I think is what we get wrong so much of the time is we think, okay, if I want to be a well person, that means that I have to exercise 5 days a week and I have to do these specific things. I have to eat perfectly on diet. I have to be drinking water. I have to drink green smoothies. I have to make a lot of money and do that on my own by starting a small business. I have to have tons of friends and be doing tons of things out in the world. I should be dating. I should be going on lots of dates. I should be in a long-term relationship. I should be married by now. I should have babies. I should have a nicer house. I should have a nicer life. And we're adding all of this stuff into our life because we think that adding on and integrating more is going to create that for us when it's not that at all. It's all doing all of that is just part of a performance that isn't genuinely you engaging with who you actually are. It's just you layering on more externals. And one of the hardest parts of this is being able to do this without putting so much pressure on ourselves. Stop being so hard on yourself to get this all sorted out and to learn it and know it and live by it. We say this is what we want to do. And so we are so mean to ourselves and hard on ourselves and guilt ourselves in order to get things done and call it willpower. But the truth is, we have to pay attention. We have to be intentional. But the pressure only makes it that we're not being compassionate with ourselves. And it makes it so much harder to live with who we actually are because we're not accepting and being kind about who we actually are. Trust yourself that you will recognize who you genuinely are. So, what are we intentionally paying attention to in order to identify our core self? The very first thing is your core values. That has changed my entire life, identifying my core values. That was one of the very first things that my therapist had me do very, very early on in our sessions. And it literally drives how the rest of our sessions and decision making and talking about my life goes because so much of the time I'm talking about something that's upsetting to me or I'm trying to figure something out and she always comes back to what are your core values or are you upset about this because you're not living in alignment with your core values. Taking the time to look at a list of core values and identify what genuinely is important to you and matters to you and needs to be a part of your life really will guide how you make decisions and how you move through your life. Side note, it also allows you to choose people in your life better. I think that was one of the things that blew my mind the most is that we all know that we have to choose a partner that has similar values to us. And we think that we know our values, but unless we actually sit down and intentionally figure out what those values are, you don't actually know. And suddenly you end up with somebody that has none of the same values as you or has no values at all. We also have to pay attention to our natural preferences, like how we recharge. There's this narrative that being an extrovert is the way to be. So we all try to be extroverted and go out in the world and whatever, when really so many of us are introverted, and that's not a negative thing. We recharge by being by ourselves and by relaxing and by reading a good book or watching a good show or by making something. Maybe some of us do recharge by going out and being around people and enjoying time with friends or family. It's knowing how you recharge. What do you genuinely feel full from? It's also knowing how we connect with people. How do you build relationships with other people? Do you do that through social drinking? Do you do that by relating to people on certain things? Do you do that by gossiping? Do you do that by having deep connections with people compared to surface level ones? How do you connect? How do you express yourself in the world? Are you more blunt and direct? Are you more shy and reserved and conservative? Are you somebody that's going to be out and yelling and loud and funny and cracking the jokes and having the cool outfits and doing all the things? Or are you going to be somebody that maybe likes to play cards with their friends or plays board games on the weekends or plays video games or sits at home and reads a good book? There's so many different ways. Like, how do you express yourself? When you get upset, when you get angry, when you feel embarrassed, when you feel anxious, how are you expressing yourself? When you're sad, how are you expressing yourself? How do you create? What do you bring to the world? And I don't mean like creating a piece of art or creating a podcast or creating content, but creating conversation, creating a high vibrational environment, creating a nice, cozy home, creating a beautiful, loving family. How do you create? What do you bring to the world? What's important to you? What is your natural preference? You have to pay attention to your genuine energy type. So much of the time, I felt like I had to show up in social situations as this exuberant, loud, intense, funny character. And so I was doing the most all of the time. Like I would be like yelling or flashing my friends or making funny jokes or just being the loudest person in the room. When genuinely, when I got connected with who I actually am, I'm pretty laid back. I'm pretty, I don't want, not reserved, that's not the right word, but I'm very stoic. I don't need to contribute to the conversation all of the time. I can just be there and exist, and I don't have this like super high energy to be doing all of the things and doing the most. Like I'm pretty chill just sitting there. And when I was honest with myself and realized that I don't have to perform in order to be liked, I was able to just exist within the confines of who I actually am. You're paying attention to what feels like home in your body. I remember right after I moved home from Tampa, I was by myself. I was in my townhome and I had all of the windows open. It was the middle of summer. I had like a nice, relaxing music moment playing on YouTube on the TV. And I think, just like dilly dallying around my house. It was a Saturday. And I realized that in my old life, I would have been drinking or out eating or out doing something. But I feel most at home inside of my body when I'm not required to go out and do all of this stuff. Like, I am more of a homebody. I am somebody that likes to just relax and hang out and doesn't feel the need to constantly be packing my life with things to do. Now, do I obviously want to go out and experience things? Do I have an experiencing things complex a little bit? Like, I want to make sure I do all of the things with my life before I die? Absolutely. But it's not this idea that I have to pack all of the experiences into my life right now. I trust myself that I will allow myself to experience life over time, and I genuinely intentionally take action to do that. But what actually makes me feel at home inside of my body is being able to just live, being able to just exist without the pressure of trying to do all of the right things that we think that we're supposed to do, because externally we've been told that this is what qualifies for a good life. Instead of saying, what would make me feel good today? What would make my life feel full today, and being able to just do that. As you're living your life, start paying attention to what feels the most you. How do you act and feel and think when no one's watching? What makes you feel full compared to drained? And then start living your life based on your actual identity, based on what you actually think, feel, and want, compared to the shoulds, compared to what expectations have been absorbed into your psyche. The shoulds make us feel all of this pressure. The shoulds make us feel the guilt. The shoulds make us feel like we have to do certain things in order to consider ourselves certain things, which is funny because it's like we're counting on ourselves for our own external validation when we live that way. Because if we do what externally is anticipated of us and we can check that off of a list, then we feel like, okay, we did it. But Do you ever actually feel like, okay, you did it, you do the shoulds, and you still find something else to be mad at yourself over? When in reality, real identity change is not about how much willpower you have, it comes naturally. Like when you genuinely are acting as your actual self, when you genuinely feel like who you actually are, it just is there. Like, I don't know how else to describe it to you, but it just is there. Like, you just feel that way. You just can move and exist and speak and feel like who you actually are, not like who you have been performing as or showing up as or trying to survive as. You just get to live within the walls of who you actually are. You don't have to prove anything or impress anybody or perform in any sort of way in order to consider yourself a certain thing because you just are and you feel good about who you just are. I think it's really important to anchor into your new self concept. And I use the word new lightly because, again, this is like a coming home to who you genuinely are, but it's new in the sense that you've been living in this survival response for so long that it is kind of new. So you have to allow yourself to anchor into that version of you so that you don't accidentally default to your old habits and patterns because it's going to feel comfortable to just go that route with it. You've beaten that path into the way that you live your life, so it's going to feel easier to follow that same path compared to forging a new one in the opposite direction. So we have to anchor into the new self-concept. So how do we do that? One big thing is going to be identity statements. When I first started running, I was somebody, this is my favorite example because I just was somebody that constantly talked about hating running. I was not a runner. I never would run. Running was my enemy. Ew, that's disgusting. Not sure who could do that. Now I do fully identify as a runner, which still feels a little bit uncomfortable for me to say into the microphone to people that know me in my personal life because I feel like I almost still can't identify as that because it's not something that I've ever identified with and have testified openly against. But I do identify as a runner. I run weekly. I enjoy running. Running makes me feel happy. Running makes me feel mentally well. It's something that I look forward to in my day. And when I started being able to say, I am a runner, even when I was just starting and I was barely running, it allowed me to continue to anchor down into that identity and make it more and more of who I am compared to being like, oh, yeah, I don't do that, but like I run sometimes, yeah, but like, I'm not like a runner, I just like I do it once in a while. Like that, how could I be consistent if I'm doing it like that? Or another great example that I love to give is I used to completely identify as somebody that had anxiety. I decided to no longer identify as that person a few years ago, maybe like 4 years ago at this point. I said, I am no longer identifying as somebody with anxiety. And from that day, from that very day that I made that decision, it dissipated more and more and more. And I don't identify as a person with anxiety anymore. I do be getting anxious, okay? Don't get it twisted. I do be getting anxious still, but I experience it as a feeling, just like when I feel happy or sad or embarrassed or angry. It's a feeling that comes up, and I have the tools to work through it, and I let it go. And I don't allow myself to identify with it. So, being able to have these identifying statements of who you are and who you are not allow you to anchor down into your new self concept. Another big one is behavior anchors, taking small behaviors that you engage in and allowing those things to be evidence of you behaving in alignment with your new self concept. Setting boundaries, having standards, not people pleasing anymore, not over functioning anymore, doing things that actively move you in the direction of your new self concept and away from your old self concept, and allowing yourself to notice those behavior changes and collect them as evidence and proof to yourself that you are identifying with your new self concept, your actual, true, genuine version of you, who you actually want to be. And you anchor in with your energy, to be honest. Like, you shift your energy in the direction of this new actual version of you. How you walk, how you talk, how you show up in conversations, what you say no to, what you say yes to, what energy are you bringing to the table? What energy are you showing up in your life with? That will anchor you down into your new self concept. The other part to this, though, is while you're anchoring in who you are, you have to get control over absorbing all of the external and absorbing everybody's energy and everybody's feedback because you are going to need to get to know you. And you do that by being in solitude, but you really can't obviously be in solitude 100% of the time. There is always going to be the external feedback coming in. So you have to not be so porous. You have to not absorb it so intensely as you were before. So as you're anchoring down, you're also getting better at not being this sponge. And if you've gotten to this point, if this is something that you fully identify with, you probably do identify as an empathetic person. You probably do identify as somebody that allows other people's opinions and emotions to dictate yours. You're probably someone who hates to disappoint people or feels responsible for the energy in a room. You might be someone that struggles to feel good enough without the validation from external world. But you cannot become who you actually are by absorbing all of the external still. Like both of those things have to happen simultaneously, anchoring down into the self concept and no longer absorbing everything at the rapid rate that you do now. The real skill to develop is being able to protect your energy, to protect your space and your self concept without closing off your heart. You don't want to build this wall. You're not closing yourself off to people and experiences and life and not allowing yourself to experience any of that anymore in an effort to not absorb any of the externals. You have to build the muscle of being able to filter out what is meant for you and what you can take on in your own way and what isn't. A good way to do this is by staying inside of your own body when you're experiencing things, when you're out in the world, being able to breathe and notice what you're feeling. When you are in a group of people, noticing that your chest feels tight or your stomach feels weird or your mind is starting to race or you're moving fast or you're talking fast or you're rambling. What is going on and what is making you feel that way? Taking inventory of the situation and of what's going on inside of you in live time. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think a common feeling is that you have to overextend in order to be loved, that you have this subconscious deep belief that you only get love if you behave correctly, if you achieve a certain thing, if you do certain stuff. When you are allowed to just exist and be loved. I promise that is the truth. You are allowed to be loved and just exist. You are responsible for your energy. You're responsible for your reactions, your emotions, your thoughts, and that's where all of your focus should go. You are not responsible for other people's emotions, thoughts, feelings, behaviors. You take inventory of those things and you decide how you want to respond. You decide who you want to interact with. You decide how to handle that, but you are not going to go and try to fix them or help them or do all of this stuff to manage them, no matter how much you love that person, no matter how much you care about that person, no matter how much you want that person to be in alignment with you. You are just going to screw yourself over by trying to manage everybody else. It's too much. We have a hard time managing our own emotions. So you should not put it on yourself to take care of somebody else's too. That's their responsibility, just as it is yours. And I know for a fact, if you think like this, you don't expect other people to manage your emotions. And if anything, we don't like when other people try to manage how we think and feel. So why would you do it to others, even if your intentions are good? You're just not abandoning yourself, is the biggest thing. You're allowing your heart to open on purpose. You're intentionally trusting yourself to know who to let in and who to not, and who to trust, who to not. And when you can trust yourself enough to do that, and you're not abandoning yourself in order to be liked or appreciated or chosen, you are able to protect your energy without having a wall up. And when you start to do this, your life is going to restructure itself. You have to surrender. You have to allow life to restructure in order to match your new identity. Relationships are going to change, opportunities are going to shift. Confidence will naturally build. Alignment will attract aligned people and repel people that are not in alignment with you. You have to give yourself permission to allow the external world to catch up to your actual genuine identity. Because when you're not living in this performative survival version of you anymore, the things that go in alignment with that version of you don't make sense. And life will restructure. You have to anticipate that to be true. You have to anticipate that there will be differences, and those differences will be uncomfortable, and you'll think something's wrong and things are not how they're supposed to be, but it's because things are different than how they've always been. And if you want things to be different than how they've always been, you have to allow them to be different than how they've always been and trust yourself to move through that with intelligence and alignment and genuinity. I have to say too that there is a misconception that you're going to cross a threshold. There's a misconception that you're going to do all of these things and you're going to be like, all right, Sarah, this sounds lit. I'm so excited. I'm really excited to become who I actually am. And then you don't feel that way. And then you are frustrated because you think, why can't I ever figure this out? But the truth is it's a constant reinforcement. It's a constant practice. It's not like one day you're 100% going to feel like this godlike, floating, glowing version of yourself every single day of your life until the day you die. It's a constant process. It's something that you have to reinforce and reinforce and reinforce. You might have to tell yourself something 14 times in one day, but you 40 times in one day. And then maybe there's times that you go weeks without having to tell yourself anything. You can just exist as the genuine version of you, but it's always going to fluctuate. It's always going to peak and valley. Identity is built through repetition. You just have to stay anchored through self-compassion and trusting yourself and knowing that you have your own back no matter what. And that's where the self-compassion comes in. That like when you start to beat yourself up and question everything and not know what's going on in your life, you have to be able to say, hey, we've gotten to this point with what we've been given, with the knowledge that we have, and we'll continue to grow, and we're making an effort and you're doing your best. I have your back. I have your back. I will not let us fail. I will not let us have a bad life. So just be kind and be gentle and be patient. And I swear I will take us through. I will get us there. You have to be able to have your own back. When you can give yourself the space and the time and the intention to become who you actually are, you naturally will begin to feel like that person, and you will be mind blown by how good you feel and how, even if your life doesn't look that crazy different, the way that your inner world is can be so different. It's addicting and empowering and powerful and just a all around wonderful feeling. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know what piece of advice resonated with you. Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what you're going to be actioning. I'm really excited. And of course, I respond to everybody that reaches out to me and comments. I love talking to you guys. So please, I would love to hear it. If you want to submit any questions, come 2026, we're going to be doing more question segments. So you can submit those on Wellish's Instagram at Wellish Podcast, or you can submit them on Wellish's TikTok, which is the same, at Wellish Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys on Monday for a brand new episode. Bye.